The whole FBI subplot, I don't know why, but it's just not quite working for me. And it's not an issue with the actress. I thought Grace Gummer was brilliant in Extant. I'm not sure if you've seen that, but it was a sci-fi series. Just not sure. Perhaps it's because I don't want to see F Society busted. I mean, maybe that's why I'm not identifying with them.
Hello, friend.
You're listening to Decrypted, Ars Technica's Mr. Robot podcast. This week, sadly, we're halfway through Season 2. So we're going to look at the big picture and what's to come with the preeminent Mr. Robot reviewer, Ars Technica's own Jonathan Gitlin. Ars Technica's Nathan Mattice here. Thanks for tuning in to Decrypted. The internet is abuzz this week because, well, Mr. Robot did something crazy.
All right, gang, let's pack it up and hit the trail. Together, because it's one for Alderson and...
Alderson for one?
As you might expect from the show at this point, they managed to eke out more surprises. As show creator Sam Esmail said on Twitter this week, Mr. Robot just aired its best episode to date. Whether you're talking about all the drama in the second half with the hacking scheme or that crazy, beautiful, wild, unexpected 1980s television homage.
What? I can feel your bug eyes on me.
Master Slave really threw us for an unexpected loop and continued the momentum Mr. Robot established once Elliot finally got back at a keyboard. On a sadder note, the episode also marks the halfway point for Season 2, and that seems like as good a time as any to look at the big picture with Mr. Robot so far. When it's time to review the show around the Ars Technica office, there's only one man to turn to, Jonathan Gitlin. One of the oldest bylines on staff, Jonathan is a jack of all trades around Ars Technica, a man who dabbles in the sciences, definitely drives a lot of cool cars, and reviewed Season 1 of Mr. Robot for us. Our guest this week is someone any Ars reader should be familiar with. He long precedes my time with the site, and if you read anything about cars, you'll likely recognize the byline today. I've got Dr. Jonathan Gitlin. Jonathan, thanks for taking some time out of your workday.
Thanks for having me on.
It is my pleasure. I've got to meet you in real life. And not only are you a lovely human being, but you reviewed Season 1 of Mr. Robot for us, which kind of helped push me to get into the show a little bit more. Now that we're halfway through Season 2, there is no better person to bring on to talk about some of the big picture issues with the show.
Why, thank you. I'm flattered.
I was thinking we could talk about this by going through... I'm going to give us 5 categories. We're going to talk about our biggest surprise with the series thus far, our favorite sequence of Season 2, the question that is lingering the most in our minds, what's disappointing us the most, and then to indulge a little bit in the subreddit culture, our favorite fan theories. So let's start. Give me your biggest surprise with Season 2 thus far.
That's a good one. I think there's a couple of things that kind of really shocked me. One is just a scene, which I think was the reveal early on about how F Society got its name. It's not a massive surprise, but that one kind of had me thinking, I get it now.
Dwarf and midget inhabitants. I mean, they also had other freaks like lion-faced man, limbless woman, shit like that. But the dwarves were the big money maker.
I thought that was kind of neat and rather left field. I think the bigger one, actually, I think is how assimilated Angela's become.
Yeah.
Now that she works for E-Corp. She has basically no affect now. She's like a blonde robot with a lot of eyeliner.
And feeding herself various commands through all these self-help videos.
I am confident. I am confident.
I am confident.
Yes. You do have to wonder kind of what's going on underneath that ponytail.
Yeah, I'm with you right there. I would say... those have all been surprising to me, and especially you touched on the F Society thing. It's been cool how Season 2 has given us the backstory for what's going on in little snippets. We got that weird massacre VHS video that gave us where the mask came from. And then this last week, it was a cliffhanger, so I guess we don't know for sure. But the actual identity of Mr. Robot and the term Mr. Robot might have come from Elliot himself when he was a wee child. So it's been cool to watch that grow up. But I would say I'll give a surprise right back to you. 5 or 6 episodes in, depending on how you want to count that first double episode. And we've spent more time with White Rose than we have Terrell, and that blows my mind thinking of how big a part of Season 1 Terrell was. He might have actually been my favorite part because he's this weird combination of charming, capable, but ultra creepy and unpredictable. And he spent more time on a phone or this week in the back of a 80s car than he has doing anything on screen this season.
Come on, grab him by the loafers.
Oh, please, gentlemen. Ankles instead? The shoes, the Ferragamo.
I think that's absolutely right. And I think maybe that gets to why maybe I'm not quite enjoying season 2 as much as I enjoyed the first one. Maybe it's the lack of Tyrell's screen time. I did love the moment when they were going to stuff him back in the trunk this week. And he was like, no, not the low. Grab him by my ankles. The shoes are Ferragamo.
Shamefully, I had to look up the brand. Definitely not something I'm familiar with as a journalist.
Yeah, he should also have pointed out that they weren't loafers, but maybe that's just me and my shoe obsession.
You mentioned that might be part of the reason you're not enjoying season 2 that much. Let's move on to what your biggest disappointment with season 2 has been so far.
So the whole FBI subplot, I don't know why, but it's just not quite working for me. And it's not an issue with the actress. I thought Grace Gummer was brilliant in Extant. I'm not sure if you've seen that, but it was a sci-fi series with her and Halle Berry. It's worth checking out if you like sci-fi shows.
Oh, what's the name of it? I didn't realize she was kind of a known entity.
Sure, it's a show called Extant, which we watched on Amazon Prime Video. But I'm sure it's elsewhere out on streaming media somewhere. So that series is set a few decades in the future. It's about an AI child, but then we also discover aliens. And I get the sort of underlying theme is, well, which one's a greater threat to the human race? Is it robot AIs, or is it these alien entities from outer space? Definitely worth watching, but it's not Mr. Robot. So back the FBI subplot. I'm just not sure. Perhaps it's because I don't want to see F Society busted. I mean, maybe that's why I'm not identifying with them. The other thing that the conversation between Zhang and Dominique also just didn't quite work for me either.
You're making me think I should invest in a decent watch.
Now, if I may ask, how does a young woman from New Jersey find her way into the FBI?
I am disgusted by the selfish brutality of the world. But at the same time, I'm utterly fascinated by it. The FBI is a perfect place for that kind of contradiction.
I would imagine that if you were a real FBI agent and the Chinese Minister of State Security took you into, his private apartments for a one-on-one, I think the FBI would make a bigger deal out of that. Although at the same time, I suppose 4 of her colleagues did get murdered.
Yes. I don't know that the FBI stuff was working for me much until we had that crazy sequence, but I'm with you.
How do you feel about all the flashbacks back to Elliot's childhood?
So this will kind of touch on what I think my biggest disappointment of season 2 is. Not the flashbacks. I think the flashbacks have, for the most part, worked for me because I am interested in his backstory. We still don't really know. Mm-hmm. Elliot is obviously dealing with a multitude of mental health issues and has some dark things in his past that might not have surfaced yet. So my thought process with the flashbacks is we might get to see some of this stuff. If you troll the subreddit like I do, people have theories about, was he abused as a child, or was Darlene abused as a child? And, was his famous thrown out the window sequence, was that something he did to himself after dealing with both physical and mental abuse? We don't know at this point, but hopefully the flashbacks will get us there. But the thing that has tripped me up with season 2 the most so far, and I'll say overall I do really like it, but the pacing has felt incredibly slow compared to season 1.
Definitely.
And I think part of the reason is we now know that when Elliot is speaking to Mr. Robot, it's really just seeing his mental thoughts play out, and we've spent so much time in season 2 with just Elliot and Mr. Robot in this dark, dingy room. As interesting as they can be and as good a chemistry as Christian Slater and Rami Malek have together, it's tough to spend so much of a show stationary with one character and his thoughts, even though I know what's going on in his brain is a huge driver of the series.
Right. And I think we might get to this when we get to some of the fan theories, but, we learn in season 1 that Elliot's an unreliable narrator. But so the question now is can you actually trust anything you see on screen anymore? Which I think it's often had me questioning, I'm watching a scene and I'm thinking, well, what's this actually a metaphor going on in Elliot's life right now? Are we actually seeing the characters like when Ray shows up, in that first episode, and then as Ray arrives, Leon leaves. So the whole thing was, well, is Ray real, or is he just an alter ego of Leon that Elliot's creating?
I tell you, the human condition is a straight up tragedy, cuz.
Before we get to the fan theories, because I feel like we should save those for last because some of them are pretty wild, let's talk about our favorite sequences. And I'll go first because I think you mentioned Ray. Looking back at the season, I think my favorite sequence is when Elliot, after 4 episodes of being in this prison-like environment, finally gets behind a keyboard. And he comes alive, and it seems like the greatest thing in the world. They do a nice sequence of his inner monologue talking about what's going on, this rush he gets, this feeling of God mode when he pwns somebody. And then they do a great cut. The audio goes out, the background soundtrack goes out, and we get a wide shot of Ray's thug basically just watching Elliot quietly type away at a keyboard.
All on Evil Corp's network, applications, everything. Domain admin. This, the thrill of pwning a system. This is the greatest rush. God access. The feeling never gets old.
And I thought that was a great microcosm of the world Elliot has built in his head versus what reality is. And it then leads to what I think was like one of my favorite moments of the series. It seems like Ray is real, but the fact that he might be the show's version of Ross Ulbricht and his site might be the show's version of the Silk Road put to bed the prison theory for me, which I was kind of nervous about. The longer those things live online, the more plausible they seem to become. And like you were talking about Elliot as an unreliable narrator, if everything in the show has some degree of unreality, it's hard for me to follow along. I just have like this lingering nervousness and skepticism in the back of my head, and I want that to go away.
Right, I think no one wants a Sin Elsewhere moment, right? Because it undermines all of the emotional investment you have in the story. I think my favorite sequence actually was probably Elliot's Adderall bender.
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
I thought there were some great images in there. And really and I said this in my season 1 wrap up actually. And I'll preface it by saying I'm not a hacker, I'm not a coder. I use a Mac because the command line terrifies me. So, a lot of the tech details that some of our colleagues understand more and then get angry because they're not exactly accurate kind of pass by me. But it's the depiction of Elliot's mental illness and how he's breaking down and kind of reacting to the world around him that I find absolutely fascinating. And that's what I really enjoyed about season 1. And it's those glimpses in season 2 as well that I'm particularly enjoying.
That was also I feel like a beautiful visual sequence, as gross as the idea of rummaging through your own, excuse my French, vomit for these pills was. It was like a beautifully shot sequence.
Absolutely. And the image of, when he gets kidnapped and then force-fed concrete, at first you're wondering, and it's interesting, and that sets you up actually for a couple of episodes later. So, you watch that and you think, is he being kidnapped? And then realize, no, it's all going on in his head. And then obviously a couple of episodes later, Ray's goons drag him out of bed and beat him to a pulp. And that time actually it is happening.
Yeah, brutally real.
If I can add this, it's perhaps not my favorite sequence, but in this week's episode, I did really appreciate the sort of 1980s bits. Maybe not quite so much the actual Mr. Robot sitcom, but, the kind of the fluff that went around it. The vintage E-Corp adverts. I do wonder, did Budweiser have to pay for that Budweiser spot? Presumably they did.
I would think so. It speaks to the commitment they had. Obviously people recognize the commitment put into the tech, and their writers and their tech advisors are trying these hacks in small scale to see if they're feasible. But they went and did all the 80s era commercials. They got the dude who's actually the voice of Alf to reprise his role. And I think my favorite detail was the theme song is written by basically the OG of 80s theme song writers, Jesse Frederick, who did like the Full House theme and the Step by Step theme. They somehow got him to write a Mr. Robot 80s style theme song.
Deep in your heart, hope stays alive. Stand up tall and surely you'll survive. Imagine a world gone insane. Gone insane. Let your mind just drift
We've got 2 more topics to talk about with the esteemed Dr. Gitlin. But first...
Word from our corporate overlords.
In times of chaos and uncertainty, when the world feels off balance, we look to those who've stood with us from the beginning. Since 1884, we've had America's back. We may get knocked down, but we'll never get knocked out. Still on your side.
Well, I want to get 2 more topics in, if you still have time. What is the biggest lingering question you have now with season 2 about halfway over?
What the hell happened to Tyrell? Where is he? I want to know what's going on.
I don't even have a good theory about what is going on with Tyrell because we've gotten so little information about him. You know, it's really him on the phone, or this week we saw him in a dream sequence in the trunk of a car. But it doesn't seem like Joanna has given away any information on it, and certainly Mr. Robot hasn't.
No. And you know, going back to the end of season 1, who was it that fell off the boardwalk railing?
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember, there was, you know, the video of at the time the hack was going on or just after, you know, and you just see in the distance someone sitting on the railing and they fall off. So, you know, was that Tyrell? Was that just to mislead us? I'm guessing it's going to come back and we'll find out something more about that.
He's got to be involved in season 2 at some point, and we're only have so many episodes left. I have tried to not spoil it for myself by digging into whether the actor, which I think his name is Martin Wallstrom, has signed on for a full season of episodes or not. But knowing the Mr. Robot staff and crew, they've probably buried that information, and I bet it's hard to find.
Right, and his name still shows up on the credits, you know, even in episodes he's not in. But then again, so does the actor who played Gideon Goddard. Although we saw him this week, so you know, I guess with the magical realism of the show, you know, even though you're dead, it doesn't mean you won't be showing up next week.
Yeah, what a good sport that guy is. He comes back for a cameo where he gets killed again.
That'd be that's his 3rd time now, right? We've seen him. He's been shot in the throat. He's had his throat cut. And he's also been run over by Alf.
He's getting paychecks, but it's gruesome work. I would say my personal lingering question, and I guess we've slowly started to address it, but I'm still not quite sure. I want to know what Philip Price really wants with Angela.
Philip Price, master of the universe.
It's become obvious she was hired for a reason, and even Angela, the character, is onto that. You know, she approaches him in that parking lot with her best guess, which is there's something in the legal case that only Angela could see and would either pull out or be quiet about. But Philip Price kind of dismisses her for that. So I think the real reason why Angela's with E-Corp and so quickly progressing up the ladder is still to come. My personal theory has been that it's got something to do with F-Society, and Price is aware she is interrelated with Elliot and Darlene somehow, but I don't know that they've given us anything on screen that indicates that yet.
I think you're absolutely right. You know, if you think about it, I guarantee the Dark Army know her links to Elliot, and we know that, you know, that there's communication there. So I tend to agree with you. I think there's definitely some ulterior motive, and I would imagine it's probably something to do with Elliot.
Well, let's get to the last big topic I want to tackle at the halfway point in the season, and you referenced it earlier. The show this season has seemed to spawn even more fan theories than the first season did, and I'm wondering which of these fan theories is your favorite, whether it's because it's just outright crazy or it's because you've been talking yourself into it a little bit.
So I must confess, I've kind of been staying away from reading the general internet about the show. So when I knew we were going to talk about this today, I kind of delved into some of them to familiarize myself with them.
Your willpower is impressive, by the way.
Why, thank you. You could call it laziness as well, but I'll go with willpower in this case. So a lot of the theories, I guess, you know, kind of come back to that same idea of, well, how much is on screen? What can we actually trust on screen? What are we seeing that's, you know, really Elliot's brain trying to cope with his actual surroundings? Kind of like this idea that he's in prison or a psychiatric hospital, but I don't know that I necessarily buy it. I tell you one, actually, the one theory that I kind of thought may have some merit is this idea that Dom, the FBI agent, and Ray the gangster are actually the same person.
Cold, brutal shit right there. I'm gonna have to go listen to some Adele on repeat when I get back home.
Oh, explain a little bit of where that comes from.
I guess the idea behind this is that it's Elliot's way of interacting. I guess the theory kind of depends on the fact that he is in prison or a psychiatric hospital, and everything that most of what we see is his delusions, and that he's invented this character of Ray as someone he can talk to as a stand-in for Dominique.
Oh, interesting.
I don't necessarily know that I buy it. It's just out of the theories that I've read, I thought that one was that's kind of interesting. I mean, there's ideas like is Tyrell the same as is Tyrell really Elliot?
Yeah.
That seems a little obvious. I don't know. What about you? You are more immersed in this subculture.
I do not have the willpower. I'm on the subreddit at least twice a week because especially after an episode airs, within that first 24 hours, it seems like people have either disproven previous theories or have a whole new trove of evidence for why something is the reality. Like we were talking about before, I struggle with the idea that some of what I'm watching is not real, and so I tend to gravitate towards theories that don't have as much to do with Elliot's reliability. And the one that I like the most is Darlene a sleeper cell with the Dark Army?
What you're doing here, Darlene, and what you're saying, you sounded like George W. Bush, for crying out loud.
Okay, first of all, that's low.
One, I think it's semi-plausible. When we first meet Darlene, she is literally dating a surrogate of the Dark Army, and perhaps that, foot soldier, as he gets called this week, Cisco, I think is his name.
I was about to say, didn't he learn not to ask questions?
God, I don't deal well with needles, and that made me cringe terribly. I wonder what will happen to him, because we really didn't see the fallout from whatever that little attack was. And the way Mr. Robot works, I have a feeling it's still to come.
Right, and we know that now from that attack that the Dark Army considers its agents expendable.
Oh, very much so, very much so. But that, the fact that when we first meet Darlene, we don't necessarily know about Cisco, but when we see them together on the screen, there's obviously a backstory and a history together. It's semi-plausible that the Dark Army works with her closely, that she may be a U.S.-based member, and Cisco is just the foot soldier running between the Chinese contingent and Darlene. And it would also kind of add to the overall idea that the Dark Army is well aware of what F Society did, and F Society, rather than being these heroes who did something anarchistic and novel, are really just little pawns being played by these giant entities struggling with each other. And, if you think of Darlene as a Dark Army actor, then you can start to second guess, well, are her actions actually good for Elliot, or has she been slowly making moves that are bad for F Society and bad for Elliot? It kind of paints the way you kind of have to go back and question her motives and her actions. So I think that's what really draws me to this theory.
I'm going to have to think about that and rewatch some of the earlier episodes. Which I think that's one of the things actually I like about this show is the certainly rewatching season 1. After seeing all of it, you take in scenes in a very different way, I think.
It's incredible how layered they made the show. Obviously it's built for this online Reddit and forum detective lifeblood that TV has nowadays, because these people dig into screenshots, they dig into all of the secret websites that USA then puts online as Easter eggs for people. I wonder how much of it was intentional in the beginning, but now I definitely think there's a lot of intent going into the scripts week to week to make sure all this stuff checks out and may have multiple layers and multiple meanings to it. So yeah, we'll definitely, depending on what happens reveal-wise, it would be very interesting to go back and watch, at the very least, the first half of this season to see, what are Darlene's motivations, and are they necessarily best for F Society as a whole and Elliot in particular.
Definitely. I think maybe a topic for us to revisit.
100%. I'm sure things are certain to come. But Jonathan, I'm glad we finally were able to connect. I look forward to hearing more of your thoughts as the season goes along, whether it's in the Slack or whether I get you back on the phone.
Thanks for having me on.
That's it for this week's Decrypted. Thanks go out to my colleague, Jonathan Gitlin, for taking some time out of his workday, and thanks also go out to the Audio Network, who provided all the soundtrack you heard throughout the episode. got a string of guests coming up who will talk about everything from the show's depiction of violence to the psychology of Elliot, so make sure you tune in next week. Make sure you're following Decrypted wherever you get your podcasts, iTunes, Stitcher, or directly through RSS. If you got questions, comments, or thoughts, feel free to reach out to us, either through the Ars Technica forums or via email, social@arstechnica.com. Just put Mr. Robot in the subject line. Until next time.
What is that? That laughing.